I've always found it interesting concerning Netflix content how you have, at the time, these debut projects that you might regard as smaller fare in preliminary recognition that end up turning into these big rating hotspots. Again, like I said, specifically for Netflix, and this might apply to other networks as well, but this has been a phenomenon that's been replicated for quite a while with this particular service. Let's say, I'm sure there's examples that you could cite from your own viewing habits and your past familiarity to their works and originals, but let's say Stranger Things, right? Probably a go-to example. I didn't even watch the second season until a year after the first season debuted, close to when season 2 was arriving. But at the time, I remember hearing about Stranger Things, at least at first when it debuted, and thinking, okay, it's a bit of a smaller title, right? That's how I regarded it, and now look where we are. Like, it took about, in that year, I kept hearing about it as well. Stranger Things. Everybody kept talking about it. And, 4 seasons later, it is a hot ticket for Netflix. Do I think The Night Agent could probably reach that level? I mean, I don't necessarily know. I mean, Stranger Things is, like, top tier in terms of viewership. Everybody jumps on that, including myself, when a new series debuts for that show, because the story is pretty good. But The Night Agent, from my understanding, has the same capabilities, where, like I said, a familiar replicating mantra. Smaller projects, at least what you assume at the time, that jive very well with audience viewership. And The Night Agent has, at least from my understanding, in the past couple of weeks it has debuted. And as per usual, I hate this as a familiar mantra with me, but I apologize for being behind in my coverage of said work that I'd like to be able to engage with at least a little in advance of its date, but I don't always get to. I do try, though. I try. So now I'm finally looking at The Night Agent. And again, like I said, preliminary recognition here. We're going to get a deeper dive together. Perhaps there are some of you who have not engaged with this work yet. I'm going to pull the official synopsis in a minute. We can read that in detail if you want a good foundation going in, as well as 2 trailers, one being a teaser we'll engage with in a minute. But just to set my assumptions here, I question maybe why this one has done so well. Maybe it's a pretty invigorating show, it's well made, compelling, again, I don't know. Because I look at the plot, and I'm very familiarized to the political conspiracy action thriller subgenre in the thriller cinema scene. It's a particular facet of entertainment that I found quite favored from a variety of projects, many of which come to mind, especially along the lines of this. But I look at the plot here, and I'm like, it comes across a bit traditional, at least in the construction of certain elements, where if you're familiarized to other work in that genre, you know the type of project you're getting, so it immediately brings up comparisons, right? Maybe it's that familiarity that drew a crowd into this. Maybe there's a freshness to this that I'm not aware of yet that I'm going to see develop in the actual project. Maybe it's the casting as well. I mean, Gabriel Basso, I'm not exactly sure, or Basso maybe. I apologize, whatever assumption or pronunciation. I'm trying to get it correct here, but maybe cover all my bases. Welcome clarification down below if you happen to be more familiarized. But he's got a pretty extensive body of work, and this seems to be one of his hotter tickets, at least in his casting attributions. Maybe he's a bit of a draw. Figure-wise, he reminds me a lot of, let's say again, to adjacent projects of ones I referenced. He's got a figure that reminds me a lot of like Gerard Butler or Chris Pratt, or I forget the guy who was in the Reacher series. I still have not watched it yet, and that looked good. Or Channing Tatum as well. He reminds me a lot of those types of stand-ins, at least on build. And he's a pretty young one. I mean, I don't necessarily know all the ages of the ones I mentioned. I think the guy in Reacher's probably the youngest of the group of mine. I would think. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But this guy's only about 3 years shy of being older than me. So, 28 years old. He's pretty young. At least 28, I'm assuming. 1994. Forgive me if there's a bit of a miscalculation. I'm curious of it, though. Again, like I said, this has done pretty well for Netflix in the recent time it's been out. So let's engage with it a bit further. I'm going to pull up the synopsis first. And again, like I said, we'll get to the trailers in a minute. But if you want a good background going in, this is what IMDb provides. And maybe you'll see, again, like I'm saying, there's traditional elements of construction here, at least on first appearances. Low-level FBI agent Peter Sutherland works in the basement of the White House manning a phone that never rings, until the night it does, propelling him into a conspiracy that leads all the way to the Oval Office. So like I said, pretty starkly stated political thriller. Set in government, that could be quite relevant these days, especially when you think of maybe, the overall, how do I word this? Because I don't necessarily want to get political at all on this channel. I try to be very open in the content I make, and politics is like, it's not a space I really want to engage with at all anymore. I could say maybe the emotions of the time period might have driven some interest as well. I mean, again, I don't know necessarily who's involved with the project here, how strong this is in terms of a story relevancy. but maybe there's some drive, at least on the emotions or mind, a lot to real world circumstances that might compel interest. Again, I don't know. I'm curious of it, though. I mean, it seems pretty invigorating. It sounds like it has a strong foundation, at least going in. I do question perhaps the naming idea, because Peter Sutherland is like a very mainstream cliche name for like a political thriller, especially one set in the circumstances that this is depicting. It just comes across to me that way. Let's take a look at it and see. I mean, I don't know. What is the name of the writers and choices? Peter Sutherland. It just seems so typical of a choice. Anywho, forgive me if there's some sentimental reasoning behind it. I don't mean to be overly cynical. Let's take a look at The Night Agent, again, from 2 trailers, starting with the teaser and get a good foundation to it. The teaser's pretty short, actually, a little under a minute, but I'm really curious, though, again, like I said, to see why exactly this series seems to be doing so well. If the trailer can allude to this in any way, maybe I'll learn better as I watch the series. I'm curious, though. Really am. Again, like I said, another one of these projects that maybe you regard at first as like, it's kind of a bit of a one-off, and then you're like, maybe not so. Maybe my first judgment was wrong. I like the structure of it, that it's kind of built up in a sense. He's on ground level. And it makes perhaps the structure of the conspiracy.
Hello?
This runs deeper than you realize. Farther than you can imagine.
Okay, it looks pretty strong, at least on the action thriller side. And like I said, let me get the name right again. Gabriel Basso's figure reminds me a lot of other comparisons. I mean, again, I'm not saying that in any way is a diss or like, oh, you know, maybe they should have gone with somebody else who has, you know, maybe a fresher look. It's not at all what I mean. I think he fits very well into this type of field of entertainment that, for me, just on first appearances, he meshes very well into the tone of what the series is trying to drive for, which again is a sophisticated political action thriller. And I'm curious, at least again on that interest alone. I mean, I've seen plenty of work, so again, maybe where I say with the synopsis, my first impression is to say, well, there are elements here that are quite typical. I'll forgive it because the delivery is pretty strong, at least from every project I've considered, and the many ones I referenced I've enjoyed, at least what I've entertained thus far. But I'm game for it either way, and I'll certainly test it out. And based on what I just saw, which is more so like a clip snippet for the most part, looks good on delivery. I definitely need a trailer, I think, to get a better perspective on the project, which I will pull up now and engage with this together. All right, here we go.
The FBI is the United States' premier law enforcement agency.
Ma'am, you can take my seat.
We have a zero-fail mission to uphold, which means that we expect nothing short of perfection.
I think a pretty stand-up guy.
FBI, I need everybody to exit the train right now.
Now please stand as I administer your oath.
Welcome to the White House, Peter. Have you ever
That's the ticket that got him in. I mean, a horrific ticket, at least in a realistic sense, but...
So you want me to be a night agent?
No, I want you to answer the phone for them. It rarely rings.
This is a deviation from the norm. Okay, I like confined thrillers, especially digging into a house setting.
It's gonna be all right.
The streaming format's going to give us a bit of a wider canvas to operate on, maybe by comparison to other cinematic endeavors.
The White House of being involved.
They're after me now, aren't they?
Go! I have orders to protect you with my life.
The more you know, the more dangerous this becomes. You have no idea what you're getting into.
You found something.
This isn't a terrorist attack. This is an assassination attempt.
How do we know that you aren't in on this?
You're really on my side, aren't you?
Come on!
I haven't told you everything yet.
I'm curious.
If we're wrong about any of it, we're done.
Take the wheel!
On delivery, it's quite sufficient. Plot construction seems to be pretty invigorating, especially on interest. There's depth to the story. The character relationships seem quite real. I will say, admittedly, I did catch that one scene. I do prefer cleaner presentations myself, so that's probably something minor. I mean, the rest of the series looks to be pretty good. At least on plot construction, I like the way it started. And it does have a very real-world feel. Maybe the series will give the FBI a little bit of a better image. I don't know, that, like I said, there's perhaps some strands of realism you could compare an emotional connection to the series and real-world circumstances. This might be more of a fantasy in that respect. I don't know necessarily, but I mean, the character that Gabriel Basso is playing seems pretty stand-up from my understanding. I mean, again, I think the way the foundation is set for him to become the night agent seems easy to track with, makes sense. I like the confined nature to it, and again, it's more of a sprawling show, at least in coverage, right? It's not necessarily localized to, we're just in the White House, right? That would make sense. I mean, it wasn't like, I have anything back on Olympus Has Fallen. Wasn't it kind of like that in that movie, I think? I forget. I think it had the same... Yeah, I think it was set from the White House. Forgive me if I'm wrong on that. Maybe it was... No, I think there were some other settings it picked. This, to me, though, like I said, this is a streaming series. Longer duration than a cinematic movie would have, right? You have more room to cover. I forget how many episodes this is. I think it's like 11 or something. Yeah, it's 11 episodes, at least the first season. It's got a good canvas, at least in my opinion, that I feel it's got enough room for depth, plenty of layers. It doesn't seem, maybe there's some aspects to it that might come across, at least on final watch, as filler. I would doubt it, though, because again, from what I'm seeing, it's a pretty tight package. And the trailer offers a good delivery, at least in my opinion. And again, I did forget to mention this as well going in. Some of the, like I said, traditionalist elements for me came through some of the adages. I mean, even in the trailer, they had question everything. What was the other one that IMDb noted? I think it's on their page. Heroes aren't born, they answer the call. Again, like I said, it feels so typical. As much as, like, Peter Sutherland name seems like a typical choice. Like, what name would we pick out of the hat? Oh, that one. Pretty average. I don't know. It was kind of funny to me. Again, maybe I'm not trying to be overly critical or mean here. It looks good. At least just on a first impression, I will tempt it. Even though, again, I will tell you, as I've said many times, there are so many streaming projects these days. When I'm on Netflix again, maybe soon. I mean, I try and rotate around from the streaming services that I'm on. What I'll do is I'll usually, if you don't know my methods before, I will intentionally cover a slate of projects for maybe one network, maybe a combination, and then I'll be able to stack up projects I want to watch. So that by the time I get out of a series, I'm like, okay, I have all this content that I can watch now that I'm ready to go watch, that I first consulted with you, that makes more sense to then subscribe for a month or so rather than just watching it for one project, letting it drag out and then switching or continuing on a subscription. I pile them up and then I switch around. At least it's my idea. And it has worked in the past. Though again, I chuck out so much money, it seems, on streaming these days. Everybody does. But The Night Agent as a watch, I think it'd be a rewarding experience, at least again, in my opinion, on a first presumption here. This is the first look I've given it today, and I could see facets of its strength. Again, expected delivery on part of the tone. And I think the casting choice works. I think Gabriel Basso is a good fit to the role as materialized here. I like the character layers. I like the sophistication of the story and the many strands to it. It does seem very much like a conspiracy-type fare. I like the, as I said, the wider canvas to the story. I think the streaming format will play well to that. As long as they utilize that space correctly, that's more of like a writing matter. And I would believe that this is pretty strong, at least if it's gotten such a wide... Well, I mean, it might be strong viewership, maybe the project won't be as strong. I mean, I don't know. I'm assuming, though, again, because I've heard so much recognition thrown its way very recently, that it is forming a connection of people, so the writing would be competent enough. I would believe that based on the trailer, at least the directing is, and the cinematography as well. It's a pretty strong package, as I said. And the action scenes seem quite good. Some of the stunt work as well, very realistic. So while it does have points to it that are very much form-fitting, right, to political conspiracy action thrillers, especially centered around like U.S. politics, and centered around the White House as well, projects that I'm very familiarized to. it still feels like its own thing in some respects, and a competent package either way that I'm like, okay, you know what, I want to engage, but I want to try it. I'll definitely take a look at The Night Agent. I'll at least humor maybe one episode. Maybe I'll continue watching it. Maybe this will be the newest big Stranger Things. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if it'll reach that level. I mean, Stranger Things, like I said, is on it's on its own tier, it seems. But you'll always for projects that try, and there are plenty of successes that Netflix has, where again, we might have regarded them initially as seeming one-offs that do very well for them. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below if you wish to disclose your perspective. Whether you're somebody that's watched the series, please be tame, by the way, about spoilers in case you are. I mean, I'd rather go in as uninformed as possible, with the exception to what I've just witnessed. But if you've seen the show, how would you regard it? And if this is your first consultation to it, what is your opinion? Is this a project that compels your interest? It does mine. And I will definitely, when I'm back on Netflix, who knows when that'll be, but I'll figure it out in the future, I'm sure. The Night Agent will definitely be on my list, and I will give it a trial run. We'll see what I think of it, but maybe, I'd be willing to believe it'll be a satisfactory project to me that I'll probably end up enjoying. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.